All right, so I think we just wanted to carry the conversation forward and get a little bit of better understanding of which local governments have been impacted with some of the federal funding freezes. And so the Menti is going to help us kind of understand which topics you guys want to talk about most. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the results. So if you guys could scan that, and then there are several choices that should show up on your phone. Okay, so it looks like other funding actions, state programs, green banks, nonprofits, folks are interested in. So does anybody in the room have an example of them, like, is anyone using a green bank through their state to fund any of their programs? Has anybody gone that route yet? Okay. Stan, would you mind sharing what Jen was sharing?
I don't know, I just feel weird holding the box. So in North Carolina, the Clean Energy Fund is the state's green bank. And so they're busy trying to, kind of make sense of the moment, of course, as well. But they are continuing forward, right? And so one of the strategies that we're seeing deployed, and this is the case with North Carolina Clean Energy Fund and its sister green bank in South Carolina, is that they believe that carrying forward is the course. They believe that a lot of the actions are unconstitutional, illegal, and they don't want to lose momentum while the proceedings are happening and all the litigation is occurring. So that's really good news because it sort of sets up a scenario where once we get to a place where the dollars can flow again, some of those foundational mechanisms, like in this case the Green Bank, will be prepared to sort of meet that moment. So we're hoping that kind of momentum will be being sustained, not just in the Carolinas, but in other states that have green bank entities in place.
That's helpful. And then in terms of some state programs, has anyone applied for funding or received funding through state allocated funds? Because a lot of us are in Florida here. Okay. All right. And then nonprofits, does anybody have any work with that realm in terms of funding? Can you, let's throw the box. I don't think so. I think it could be broader because then we could try to pull in those ideas.
I've been working a lot on partnerships with nonprofits. So I've worked with C40 cities. They funded a climate workshop on funding. So that wasn't a direct allocation, but it was an administrative award to the city. Also with the World Wildlife Fund to implement a composting program. And a couple other nonprofits. So it hasn't been like millions of dollars in big dollars, but it's been able to build capacity and fund programs that have direct community impact.
And it doesn't have to be electric transportation programs for these questions, like are other segments of your city receiving funding?
Yep, we've received, Heather Bullock, Charlotte, we've received substantial funds from the VW settlement grant in North Carolina through DEQ, so for electrification.
Okay. Are you raising your hand? No. Yes.
This is not having to do with state funds, but the Georgia Power has been pretty aggressive with their Make Ready funding, which is really necessary to implement a lot of the programs that we're interested in. And I'm interested in whether or not the electric power industry, whether that's, I'm not sure what their trade associations are, whether or not they are likely to be allies in this. And I feel so odd asking that question because they're not our friends most of the time, but they have a lot more influence in Washington than we do. So is the Electric Power Institute lobbying in this area, and is our funds that are generated from the power companies being calculated in some way? Are we measuring that?
Do you want to take this?
Say what I know. So I think right now, from what we're hearing from our public utility friends, is that they're dealing with a lot, right? They're trying to understand this sort of new landscape and how it's going to impact things that they've either already got in motion, or if they're in an existing rate case or integrated resource plan, how it may impact what they're looking to do. Offshore wind would be a perfect example, right? And so I'm not sure where their lobbying efforts are going to focus and the degree that they're going to be focused on electric transportation. We have not seen that historically. We have not seen the large investor-owned utilities in our region lobby for electric transportation. They have deprioritized it as a political issue that they're going to burn capital on. Having said that, we have a lot of programs in place in the Southeast, like the Make Ready program that Georgia Power has, Make Ready, it's called Charger Prep Credit, that Duke Energy has in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, programs that FP&L has, etc. Those programs all are outside of that federal domain, right? Those are all still rolling. And so I think one of the challenges for us, whether we're advocates like we are who participate in the regulatory process at the state level with utilities, or you all engaged or engaging in regulatory proceedings, is this is a time and a place to try to get utilities to potentially lean in more and get regulators to understand the value of those utilities leaning in more. Because the regulators in our region don't have a lot of experience considering complex electric transportation opportunities. They really haven't had dynamic dockets opened up by the utilities for them to consider. They've been pretty blasé, piloty kind of stuff, right? So now would be the time for us to be working collectively to try to get our regulators and our public staff in particular to understand the value to all ratepayers of utilities really leaning in now and trying to fill some of the gap that may be left by federal dollars. I think there's a chance for our utility friends to be our allies, as we move through these next 4 years in ways they haven't been so far. And hopefully they'll see that opportunity. But I think you all as large customers are going to have a role to play in making sure your utilities understand that you're going to need them more than ever in order to achieve the goals that you have that may have been relying on some federal funding that's not there anymore.
Thank you. All right, and has anybody considered like a ballot initiative to get residents to say, like, we want to invest in clean energy in their municipality, and then like finding like bonds to make that happen? Has anyone, because I know that there have been some that have considered it for like transit, but I'm wondering for like clean energy in the absence of some of this funding, if that's anything that you guys are talking about. So I'm seeing maybe let's pass the box.
Well, I think the county our mayor announced some time ago that her intention is to go out with the community and those projects within the clean energy projects. Yes, it was put on hold initially, and then but it's still alive and intended that it will be come back, I guess.
I was just thinking, about the nonprofit space, and it's not specifically in vehicle electrification, but we are partnering with the Knight Foundation in Charlotte. They have helped us with a project we call Green Prints, which is sustainable infrastructure in our corridors of opportunity, historically underinvested areas of Charlotte. And they seem to be more and more interested in sustainability related topics. And I was just looking at the Knight Foundation
All right, any other thoughts on that? Then I want to switch gears and just see if we can capture, just try to share with each other what we know about what we've been being told by different agencies for our different projects. Because I think that would be really helpful to understand, like, what is the EPA saying versus Department of Transportation versus, the different agencies. So if you feel comfortable sharing, like, what your current ability to draw down funds are and what you've been being told, I think that might be good to kind of share with one another.
Hi, Cassie Cordova with the City of Clearwater, Florida, and I just got an email less than an hour ago, which it doesn't say what it's in reference to, and I've already seen this letter from other municipalities, but I just got it, and it's from the DOE, which I have 3 DOE grants, and it doesn't specify, but it's the Department of Energy Golden Field Office, and it just basically says, to cease and desist on all projects. I'm assuming it's for the Energy Futures grant, but I've already seen this letter probably a week and a half ago because somebody else showed it to us, and I thought, why don't I have one of those? But I just got mine, so yay. Yeah.
Don't share.
So, very appropriate, I suppose, for this.
But part of being able to come up with solutions is having the data to know, like, where everybody's at, and you have those touch points. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my name is Kimberly White. I'm on the west side of Atlanta. I'm part of the Metro Atlanta area. I manage Cobb County's sustainability programs and projects. And, oh, hey, Gordon. I was told by our communications department that they are putting together a marketing piece that I have to probably work on this evening about what the impact will be for us. We got the EECBG grant, and we were in the middle of doing 3 different projects that was a part of that. We were building our sustainability plan for the county. We were putting in electric vehicle infrastructure, and then we were also building a mini charm center. And we only got through a few of the projects, and we're being told that we are not going to be able to draw down on the rest of it. And so that's an issue because in the beginning they told us not to draw down on it first because then we would owe interest. So had I known that, I would have drawn down first, no matter what. But that's where we are. So I really don't know. And we're at the place where our fleet department has decided to spend their own budget money to install the electric vehicle charging stations that we already got because we can't draw down on the federal funding now. Oh, well, yeah, but they've got the funding, like my department doesn't, so like everything that we were supposed to be doing, we're not doing. But I have one question, I'm sorry, and I got here late, and I don't know if like this question was already asked. So my counterpart in Gwinnett County, that's like kind of northeast of me, she had a question, and she said that the executive order unleashing American energy from January 20th, 2025 specifically calls out eliminating the electric vehicle mandate, including unfair subsidies and other ill-conceived government-imposed market distortions that favor EVs, and later goes on to say that it will ensure that no federal funding be employed contrary to this. Could this be interpreted to cover installation of EV charging infrastructure on public grounds that is publicly available, i.e., we do not provide other fuel sources to the public, or is it only directly tied to federal grants and loan programs? Does direct pay fall under this as well?
So you just missed Amy Turner.
Okay.
And that's an Amy question. She was here and she talked about both of those. But like, long story short, direct pay not impacted that we know yet. But she's going to be back in the room, so I would. Nick's talking to you, and I'm talking to you. You can't hear both. Okay. Okay.
Gordon?
Yeah, we'll try again. So we applied for a CFI grant. We were notified that we were going to get an award, and then it went away. In my application, I identified my local funding source because, to build a project, because CFI is a reimbursement, 80%, as all DOT grants are. So I know you don't really have an answer to this question, but I want to go ahead and implement this program, at least for those really urgently needed locations that I had identified in my CFI application, pay for it with local money, and then apply for reimbursement when things are clarified, which is the indefinite future. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, what we're doing.
Can you explain to folks that may not, is it through the ASAP portal?
No, the local funding that we got is actually part of a separate SPLOST that was allocated for clean energy projects. And what we had in mind was implementing those projects, get reimbursed, recycle that money back into other clean energy projects. So by spending it, if I don't get reimbursed, I'm jeopardizing the future of any other projects.
And I think that's the answer. What is your risk tolerance locally if you don't get reimbursed? Since we don't have certainty, so I think it's largely put in the local question what your risk tolerance is.
Yeah, well, that's why I didn't really expect an answer, but.
I would also add that you get reimbursed for any money you expend before you have a grant agreement.
Right.
Place as well, so I think you're putting a lot of attention by this. We may have, that's part of it. Oh, I thought you said you didn't have a grant.
This is for renewal. This is for CFI.
Yeah, this is
Yes,
CFI.
no grant agreements yet.
Yeah, and like I said, they said, well, go to this webinar, and then of course that webinar got canceled. But I've got projects that really are ready.
Was this the most recent round of funding?
Yes.
So round two?
Round two.
So you don't have your grant agreement yet?
Correct.
I can read something that'll probably bring some clarity to that, because City of Jacksonville got the CFI grant too. And in the email from USDOT, it says, this was in the award letter, this email is not an authorization to begin work, and it does not guarantee federal funding. For each selected project, USDOT and the selected applicant organization must establish and execute a signed, mutually agreed upon grant agreement prior to the disbursement of award funds. In all underlined words, no costs incurred before USDOT signed and executed the grant won't be reimbursed. So anything you start ahead of signing that agreement, they will not reimburse it.
Yeah, and most federal agency grants of any kind, right? So you get that fancy award letter that everyone celebrates for about 5 minutes before you realize, oh my gosh, all the stuff you have to do. But that is not locking in and committing those funds federally until you have that fully executed grant agreement in place.
But we even need to go to council to put an amendment, even if we did sign it. So,
But you know, you could talk to the Atlanta Regional Commission, because they would possibly have some resources to know that, so. Right. They probably don't, but there's a chance.
Well, they're in the room, so you can ask them while touring a museum and listen to a music.
All right. Does anybody have a signed grant agreement that is not able to draw down funds? It's like there's different buckets, right? I'm sorry? Okay. Okay.
Well, I would just share, because I think there are parallels. Another program, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, I mean, I think there's parallels there. We have been told that our drawdowns are locked, that we're not able to draw down right now. Yes, the CPRG planning grant, correct, yes. That we're not able to draw down right now is what we've been, and let me, And let me clarify that I have not been told this by EPA. I've asked, and it's been a week with no response. So I think we're not hearing it from the federal agencies. I've heard that from our own internal finance people. So I should clarify that.
So I wanted to add to that, we also have the CPRG planning grant, and we were instructed to do, well, we needed to do a budget transfer, and they've been absolutely non-responsive to any emails. We were supposed to update our QUAP. We did turn in our quarterly reports, and normally we get an instant response. We received it, or we didn't get any of that. So it's been radio silence from the EPA CPRG team, and they also canceled all of the forums and technical assistance things that they had as well.
I will say that anecdotally, I think we've heard, I mean, I'm assuming everyone's Region 4 EPA here, but different regions might have slightly different tweaks on this, but in the end, I think we've heard a lot anecdotally of folks just not being able to get the reimbursement websites down, all of the pieces. So I think just know that that's going to be pretty commonplace and uncertain for a little while, as Amy Turner mentioned before.
I did get an email from the representative that was helping us from the DOE. And the last email I got from her before it was radio silence was to make sure that everybody who she was assisting, for us to go into the system, when we do our quarterly reports, and put a bunch of information in there about your project, what you were doing to get to that point, what you're working on, because she mentioned that other people will be looking at that information. And so you basically have to sell your project again, because I don't know if they're in the system, choosing what goes forward and what doesn't. And so you don't want, limited information in there and then they just throw your stuff out, even though we already got approved.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and pause this conversation, and we'll, Nick, nope.
Well, I do just want to say, this has been a lot of hard stuff, right? And we're all in the middle of it, you all especially. But what we are here to talk about are different ways of thinking about how we can propel this forward. And yes, it will be a time for kind of innovative thought, partnership, and conversation. And that's part of what we're trying to achieve here. So I just want to at least end a little bit on that note here and what we're hoping to help get out of this and you all being here. So yeah, there's a lot of chaos and noise, but I think there's a lot of potential opportunities here too.
Yes, and one of the topics was, in absence of Bill and Ira, how are we going to move forward? But I don't want to start that conversation up and then have us only have 5 minutes to get into it. So let's go ahead and take a break here.
All right, welcome back. And we're going to go ahead and spend this last session kind of doing two things. One is recognizing the incredible work that Bill and Ira stimulated in our space that many of you have done, that despite everything we were talking about earlier today, a lot of work has been done to build community buy-in and trust and partnerships. A lot of work has been done figuring out how to effectively and efficiently site charging infrastructure. A lot of work's been done in putting together really complex projects to then submit and get awarded, regardless of what's happening right now with those awards. And all of that work has been made possible by Bill and Ira's kind of, inspiration, right? That it created a moment where local governments had the ability to convince themselves that it was worth pursuing things that we've been thinking about pursuing for years, right? But weren't able to start making happen. So we want to take a moment in this last session to recognize that a lot of good work was done, work that we should be able to leverage as we move forward. And so this slide just shows the amount of Bill and Ira transportation funding that came to the Southeast. So it ranges from, we got 2.7 billion in North Carolina to 800 million rather in Alabama, right? But it's a staggering amount of funding that's supposed to be coming here, hopefully will come here, but underneath all of that is the work that you all and other partners did to secure these funds, right, to get these projects awarded, including, what happened, in the 2 CFI rounds, right? So this map just shows the distribution of CFI awards around the Southeast. And what we saw is that in the first round of CFI, right, there were very few awardees in the Southeast. In the second round, the Southeast kicked butt. And there was a lot of awards that came here. And it showed kind of a level of, maybe it showed like the timing. Like maybe it just took a little bit longer after the passage, of the bipartisan infrastructure law for some of our local governments to sort of get to that point where they could submit, a really compelling project. Or for others, sometimes they submitted the first time, didn't get it. That was kind of a weird CFI round anyway, and then resubmitted and got it. So it was really exciting to see, these awards come in. So what we want to do in this last session is I'm going to call on folks who already know they're going to get called on. So if you don't know you're going to get called on, don't worry, you're not going to get called on. Who received CFI awards to talk for a couple of minutes about what the creation of that project enabled in their community, what leverageable things are kind of coming out of the process, even if the funding is held up or the funding doesn't arrive. Because as Nick was pointing out at the end of the last session, we want to be spending our time, for the rest of the time today and then our time tomorrow, kind of thinking beyond Bill and Ira, right? So if the Bill and Ira moment was to be over, let's just imagine it was over, right? How do we leverage all the momentum that it's helped to build to transition into what is next and keep the momentum going forward? So I'm going to first, let's see, so is Mike from Orlando here? All right, let's honor the great city of Orlando who's hosting us today. And Mike, if you talk for a couple minutes about your all CFI project, as I was saying before. Wait, wrong. Mike's not CFI. Why are you on my list? Why is Mike on my list? Oh! Mike's on my list. I'm supposed to acknowledge Mike from the city of Orlando and thank him for welcoming us and hosting us. So once again, a round of applause for Mike. Is there anything that you wanted to say, Mike?
I mean, I can say we implemented a lot of our public charging network several years ago before there were a lot of funding opportunities. So I think there are ways to figure it out without the federal funding. We have well over 100 publicly available chargers in the city of Orlando. I know there's a couple just a block north from here, a couple more 2 blocks south. There's a high-speed charging hub about 2 blocks to the east. So it is doable without the federal funds. It's a little bit harder, and you have to go argue with your mayors and your budgeting departments and all that fun stuff to say how important it is. So hopefully if this federal money doesn't come through, people can still kind of build out that charging network.
All right, well, thanks, Mike, and thanks again for welcoming us to Orlando. All right, so now I am going to call on somebody who I know was an awardee of a CFI grant. So, Fala Sade, would you mind talking a little bit about the project that the Atlanta Regional Commission was awarded?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Fola Sade from the Atlanta Regional Commission. We are the MPO for 19 counties in Metro Atlanta. We're also a regional planning commission. And I say this because we wear a couple different hats, from community development, community development planning, workforce development, aging and independent services, natural resources, and then the transportation part. And part of our grant was really thinking about transportation electrification and how it impacts all of these different work areas for us. The CFI that we were awarded was awarded in round 1. It was for $6.1 million. And it was to install, or it is to, install 75 to 100 chargers. That's 300 to 400 ports. We applied with a private industry partner, which is Volta. We made sure that they were aware when we were applying for this grant that we still would have to go through a fair and open procurement process. The goal of applying with Volta in terms of their model was to provide free charging. And so this would be in areas with businesses, retail, restaurants, and it wasn't to provide kind of the full charging, but to fill some of those gaps in terms of destination charging. When we conceived of the grant, it was part of a larger Reconnecting Communities project through our agency, or excuse me, Reconnecting the Region initiative. And this was really to think about communities that had been disconnected through infrastructure, whether it be roads, rail, airport. And so we wanted to think about what are the ways in which we could foster greater economic opportunities. I think in terms of this grant, we were applying for the grant, but we were also in the process of getting started a regional transportation electrification plan. And so I think that was really important for our grant application, that we had already allocated money through UPWP to do a regional study of transportation electrification in our region. And in many ways, we did it kind of backwards. Some of that study information would have informed the grant, but it ended up aligning. Probably what you want to hear most about, I wanted to just set the stage, but you probably want to hear most about what's happening now. So I have very specific notes to share with you all. So we executed a funding agreement with FHWA on January 13th. We finalized an RFP, and we were prepared to release that RFP this Monday. However, due to the uncertainties regarding whether reimbursed expenses, whether we'd be reimbursed for expenses that we incurred in the contracting process, we've decided to pause. We continue to send updates, and I believe Amy talked about sending updates. We're still sending updates. We don't have any updates, but we're making sure in line with our contract agreement that we are updating our project manager with FHWA Georgia Division. And we are closely monitoring the news, and we are in a wait and see space like everyone else.
And so I think, you know, what the Atlanta Regional Commission's grant at least showed me was a real incredible roadmap to how to integrate EV charging into a broader regional transportation plan.
I forgot to mention some other things. I wrote a couple notes about the grant, this process that may or may not be helpful for folks. We don't put in infrastructure, so this was really new, and I think it was an opportunity for us to think about what kinds of partners are there in this work, and also for someone interested in applying for grants, what kind of internal conversations do you need to have as you pursue these projects? And so a couple of those, maybe thinking about what is your institutional capacity, cash flow, financial safeguards to put in place as you manage a project. Thinking about your financial systems and staff, are they up to speed in handling federal grants? You kind of want to have that in place before you get the grant, or kind of think through those processes. If you're working with a state DOT, making sure that they are signed on at the early part of the application process, that being something else important. I think the other thing is thinking about your areas of greatest impact. And that was part of what we did when we applied for the grant. So we looked at a map as to where the charging infrastructure was currently in our region. And it was mostly to the north, more affluent areas. It had mostly been determined by utilization and kind of a business model, and we wanted to kind of address issues of access. And so for you, as you're applying for projects, thinking about what's important for you as a local community and where you want to kind of direct your attention, what's your value statement. The other piece in terms of thinking about collaboration, when we looked at other grant opportunities outside of CFI, we started talking, actually, there's some folks in this room who are on calls and offering letters of support to each other. And so figuring out how are we not in competition with one another, but thinking about kind of a regional impact for your communities. And so those were a couple of other things that, you know, I just wanted to kind of mention. And lastly, in terms of my notes, Yeah, having as you're kind of doing this planning process, having an understanding of different market segmentations in your area. So kind of what is the need, and again, having conversations with partners, whether it be the utilities, whether it's private investor or EMCs, early on in this process. And so I think that was a big piece. We began to have different kinds of conversations as we entered this space with folks that we had been in relationship with before, but not as it related to this particular work. So that was really, I think, an important step for us.
Thank you very much for sharing. And so the intent of this too is to start identifying in the room folks who have had these kinds of experience so that we can be following up with each other and talking more. So Dan from Gainesville, hello. We'd love to hear about your project.
Is this thing on?
You got it? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank Dory and her amazing team for the amazing educational and community collaborations. Thank you so much. And yeah, so Gainesville, my position with Gainesville is relatively new. I'm being in this position roughly 2 years. So last year, our main focus was the funding allocation. So last year, City of Gainesville, we applied 12 federal and state funding, and we got awarded 10 of those, with a total of $28 million. So starting this year, City of Gainesville, we was awarded $11.65 million from the CFI grant. So I also want to use this opportunity to thank my counterparts and for your continued support and inspiration. So now I'm going to share a couple best practice that we learned from all the grant application. So first and foremost is the staff buy-in really matters. So when we first started working on the CFI grant round 1, we did not get it. And also we have a large pushback from our staff because we don't have the staff capacity. We eliminated 135 positions during that time. So we were able to get the support from our elected officials and also talking with my counterparts from Orlando, Miami-Dade, Jacksonville, and we learned from them that potentially we can look into a public-private partnership. And also we explored the revenue share model. Therefore, we gained the staff support for the grant. And the second best practice I want to share is that involve the community early. So when we talk about electric vehicle, oftentimes back to 2023, I hear a lot from the community that this is for the rich. But in Gainesville, we have 135 public charging stations. We do not have enough charging stations for the future. At that time, Gainesville has 2,000 electric vehicles, including the plug-in EVs. So definitely we are not ready for the future. So we were able to explain to our neighbors and community members that these EV charging stations will not impact their life on a bad way. And then we hear questions like, is this gonna impact our regular parking spot? And during a multiple community organizations and events, we were able to explain the logistics behind the charging stations, like the idle fee associated with the charging, that whenever you are not using the charging station while you park there. So in the end, we are able to gain additional 9 community support for this grant application. And the last but not least is to find the common ground. So Gainesville, there are a couple changes back and forth between general government and our utility company. So for the first round of the application, the utility company worked very closely with us. Like we have meetings every week for the round 1 application. However, we did not get it. So the process is not easy. And then the second round, our utility company, the only utility company we have in Gainesville, separated from our local government. So therefore, they removed their Office of Sustainability. They also fired my counterpart, which is the Chief Sustainability Officer. So making the collaboration extremely hard. But we have to be creative and continue moving forward. So during the meeting with them, we were able to demonstrate the revenue that potentially will be increased from those charging stations. So in a way, we're able to bring them back to the table. So during the entire process, I just want to share that there's a saying, coming together is a start, staying together is a progress, working together is a success. So I want to say let's continue to collaborate, especially during the time of uncertainty. Let's continue supporting each other, lifting each other up, and driving towards a more sustainable and resilient future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Inspiring work. And Kim from Miami-Dade.
Do you
Would you like to share some?
You want the football?
Your choice.
Sure, I'll take the box.
All right, go
I'll take
for
the
it.
box. Is it on? Okay. So we were, maybe I should stand right on my back to everybody. So we were awarded a CFI grant in round 1B. So that was the second award under that round. We were encouraged by FHWA to try to get our grant agreement in place as quickly as possible. We worked to do that. Things slowed down there at the end. Our understanding is that when FHWA received the orders for pencils down, that our grant agreement was in queue to be signed. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a sad story, and at this point, it's unknown what will happen with that. But our award was for $4.7 million to install public level 2 chargers at 68 facilities, including Miami-Dade County facilities, City of Miami Gardens, one of our smaller municipalities, and we also partnered with Miami-Dade College for installations at their campuses. The only thing I can say is that, in this time of uncertainty about the future of that grant, we're kind of leaning back on some of those prior strategies we were using to achieve those installations, similar to Gainesville, like looking at those public-private partnerships. And when we were awarded this funding, some of the private industry said, why did you even seek this? Because we're being approached every day with companies that are saying, we will come in, install the infrastructure on your county properties, collect that revenue, sometimes even give you revenue sharing. But the reason that we really saw the CFI grant as being important is because the locations that they're prioritizing are the locations with high EV adoption, which are our more affluent areas in our county. So we had really hoped that, we could use that funding to encourage those installations more equitably. I'll use the E word. And encourage greater EV adoption in those areas. We have one of the tougher nuts to crack is kind of where we have established multifamily residential, and it's very difficult to kind of get that infrastructure into those existing communities. So providing for it in the county facilities that are nearby. But we are leaning back now on those public-private partnerships. Some of those we've been able to do through what the county has marketing partnership agreements, so they're able to put ads on them and then give us back some of that funding that they generate by selling the ads and through their end user fees. So we're looking at that. We also have a sustainable buildings program. So any new county facilities or substantial retrofits have to install 2% of the parking spaces have to provide for public charging infrastructure. So we are getting them on new buildings and retrofits of county facilities. We are working on our fleet. We have a mandate to increase the amount of our replacement vehicles that are electric every year. It increases by 10%. By 2030, we're supposed to be at 100% of our replacement vehicles being electric. And obviously that requires an extensive amount of infrastructure to support it. So we entered into an agreement with our local utility, FPL, for them to actually install the infrastructure and assess it back to us as a tariff. And we have like 66 sites that are expected to receive that infrastructure over the next 5 years. We are leaning in heavily on elective pay. For our 2023 filing, we had 199 clean energy projects, 166 were EV purchases, and 33 charging infrastructure installations, and that resulted in over $3 million back to the county. So I think that's a huge success that we can all continue to lean into, that it still exists out there and is a win. What's that?
Have you actually gotten from the IRS?
I don't know. Based on Amy's presentation, I don't feel worried, but now you have it in my head. Oh, okay. And then I just wanted to say, though, that one of the also difficult things that we've been trying to tackle at the county is that the elective pay includes that greater percentage where you have an apprenticeship program. And what we found, at least in Miami-Dade County, is that those opportunities are really lacking. We hosted a workforce roundtable with our local industry and Opportunity Miami, who's a local entity, the workforce entity. And what we found is that they don't really exist. So that's another thing that we're working on during this period of uncertainty, is at least trying to bolster those opportunities so we can maximize those elective pay opportunities and make sure there's apprenticeship programs for those companies to utilize so that we can get those higher percentages. That's it. Thank you. Appreciate it. No words of inspiration, sorry.
No, it's great. And I think, just to underscore that, there is a lot of progress being made in the private sector. And, the federal funding that's been flowing has been helping, the private sector mature as well. So we're really excited to see some of what's coming on for multi-unit dwellings, multifamily dwellings in terms of charging solutions. Excited to see utilities kind of in a position to step in like FP&L is with you all. And also just want to underscore how important that elective pay was for you all, and that's something still on the table for us to be thinking about strategic ways to advocate for it moving forward. Mark from Hollywood. Mark.
Here you go, Mark.
All right. Catch the box.
Catch the box. My name is Mark Johnson from the city of Hollywood. Okay, I'm going to really talk into the box now. The city of Hollywood, it's about 30 square miles, and we have about 154,000 people there. But we also have 7 million visitors a year come through our city, and we're located between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Over the last 2 years, we've definitely seen that the EV and microtransit growth is exceeding our charging infrastructure that we have in the city. So we submitted a grant application, and we received a notification that we were awarded about $6.9 million to install 142 chargers and another 12 fast chargers throughout the city. Out of that 6.9, we have local funds that make up about 25% of that. So the balance would be federal funds. One of the innovative things about this was that we also looked at our microtransit and micro-mobility needs that we had throughout the city, especially in some of the disadvantaged areas. And there was a lack of charging infrastructure out there. So this grant that we put together also included charging capability for the micro-mobility equipment that we had throughout the city, like the little scooters. And also the city has a microtransit service that we use in the city. So this grant was supposed to help us install all that stuff out there. We, like some of y'all here, received the notice that said that this had been put on hold for 90 days. So we're just kind of sitting back right now waiting to hear what the next steps are on the grant.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And yeah, really exciting to see the way you all brought in, micromobility, into that project and looking for sort of branching out in that way. I'd like to, we've got a couple, we're wrapping up at 5 o'clock, so we're going to jump back into talking about CFI, but building off of the conversation about elective pay, Melody, would you mind coming up? You have some slides that you wanted to share to talk a little bit about Clearwater and its elective pay success.
Hey everyone, I'm Melody and I'm from the city of Clearwater. So we have applied for elective pay last year for our 2023 projects. Super small projects compared to your example, but it was a small. I guess it was an easy way for us to really dip our toes and try to understand the whole process. It might be daunting for first-time filers, and so we broke it down to the 7 steps. And I won't go into details, but happy to discuss with anybody later on. But basically, the most tricky part was to figure out if you want to use calendar year or fiscal year filing, and the deadlines are different. And I guess what determines which one to choose is when your project was completed the previous year. And we chose calendar year for the sake of including this park renovation that had solar panels on our buildings and solar modular picnic pavilions, and as well as EV chargers as well. And there are some key durations to take note of. For example, if you're pre-filing your projects, it takes about 120 days, up to 120 days to receive those project numbers, which you will definitely need to have before you can file for the tax form eventually. And I have a timeline later that I'll show in a little bit to remind us what are the upcoming deadlines for this year. And through the process, we figure out that sustainability division will be taking on most of the coordination effort, spearheading, getting all the information, the documents from different projects. But we are also very much aligned with our finance department. The finance director was super helpful in providing those banking information, setting up his own ID.me account on the pre-filing portal, and delegating super user accounts to our division as well. And then there's also collaboration with the project team that are usually in public works, engineering, general services, sometimes public utilities, so on and so forth. And we recommend engaging with them super early. As soon as you hear about a potential project coming up, just go talk to them and start gathering information. And also the attorney's office as well, to have them look at the forms, and also they might want to give us some guidance on legal concerns along the way. I, again, won't go into the details, but we're focusing a lot on the EVs, hybrids, and also EV charging infrastructure for today's topic. So the credit 45W and 30C are, pretty crucial for today's conversation. A tip that we would like to share is, for example, if you have a project that involves putting in upgrades to your electrical infrastructure system, or a transformer is going in, and you're thinking ahead, hey, we might want to add EV chargers in the future, in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, then I guess the trick is to start collating those documents early, and also think about pushing for 30% money back instead of 6%. That would mean that those installation pulling the wires, building those conduits will have to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So start that conversation early with your engineers and contractors, and even build those language into contracts. I think someone in SSDN had a really great example that we definitely borrowed. And the Dory will be able to share later. But basically, and then also if, there's no plans of adding a single EV charger, but you're already putting in all the money to do the infrastructure upgrade, try to convince the project manager, like, hey, you might just want to add in one EV charger, and then you're able to tap on I guess you're able to get back the money for the infrastructure, instead of waiting for 2 years later and getting the money back later on. The same applies for solar as well. So we're talking about solar readiness on the roof, and then having a smaller system set up right now instead of waiting to set up that solar system later. And we made one-pagers for our project managers to be informed on the type of documentations that we need throughout the process. They find it pretty helpful, and they refer to it back pretty often. And then a little bit on the project side, we have just 3 dual-port chargers at the park, and we're estimating just $2K back in elective pay. So some lessons learned from the process is, because the project started way before elective pay even came about, we were not able to go down to the detail of like, oh, we reviewed all the pay apps and there were no mention of the specific breakdown on the costs. So then, taking a step back for future projects, we made sure that we informed the project managers, like, hey, every single line item needs to be specific to EV infrastructure upgrades, electrical conduit, just put it in there, or solar accordingly. So then it makes our life easier later on when we're filing and saving the documentation. And then again, add prevailing wage apprenticeship language in procurement stage, because for EV charging installations, to be eligible for elective pay, and to get the full 30%, you need to have this requirement met. And then on the note about apprenticeship, I think Electrification Coalition mentioned to me that if the city has tried very hard to be like, hey, we want apprentice on the job, and the contractor says, we've tried to find, but there's no such person or no such opportunities, that requirement might be waived. So maybe look into that, and it's an option. But prevailing wage part, is still going to be a requirement, hard requirement. And also, yeah, I guess I mentioned that already. Have elective pay in mind early in advance at the EV charging readiness stage, or like the solar readiness stage. And for the form itself, through our process, we learned that there's 2 additional work doc attachment that needs to go with the form. So just be mindful of that. Also forgot to mention, your chargers needs to be located in a low-income census tract or non-urban. And the map is still available as of today. Just some challenges and solutions that we figured out. Choose a filing timeline that makes sense for you. Post-project information inquiry can be hard, so do it as you're progressing with your project instead. It's a new program. Once you figure out who is supposed to do what, that will make it very easy moving forward, and you just repeat that process. There might be varying levels of interest in pursuit for elective pay, and I guess our job is to just emphasize on fiscal responsibility. And at this point, everyone's super stressed about what's happening right now. Electrify is like the small win for us, I think, and it's not taken away yet. And like Amy said, it won't be. So grab that low-hanging fruit and just file for it. If the project is small enough, we were able to file by ourselves. But if it's massive, like a huge number of projects, there are e-filing, I guess, consultants out there that could help with the process. I'm not too sure about their business model, but I've met with one and they are super helpful. So have those conversations and figure out your options. It is doable by yourself. And then as well as proactive planning. We have an Excel spreadsheet at the bottom there that lists all the potential upcoming projects. So we just keep on checking back on when we need to engage with whomever. Some resources and tips that we really, really appreciate. Lawyers for Good Government has a whole page on the resources that they provide. Electrification Coalition as well. And a lot of these were last year, and they had a bunch of webinars, and I think most of the information are still really valid, so I will go back to them. And the IRS sent out a video guide on filing the 990T forms, and that video guide is super helpful. Like some of the examples were such that you can follow step by step, and you'll get it right. And then they also have the secure messaging system on the pre-filing portal that you can engage them with, and a mailbox. They've been very responsive to us. Simplify the process internally. Provide them with whatever one-pagers or documents that you can provide. Make them feel that this is not a daunting process. I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, my bad. This is the timeline. Last thing, yeah, just May 15 is the time to file if you are doing calendar year. But if you're doing something else, we can talk about later if you need help figuring it out.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience, and well done. I think the size of the project is secondary to getting that done. So congratulations. All right, so we are running up against time, and we've got a few more folks that I want to hear from. So for those folks, I'm going to ask that you try to give us like that 2-minute distillation of some of those lessons learned, and try to use this as a moment to just signal to the room kind of what that experience was, so folks can find you later to follow up with you. So Ashante from Jacksonville, can you give us a lightning round version?
Get a picture of me. Hey, y'all. So City of Jacksonville was awarded a $2.8 million CFI grant. This would increase 62.5% of EV chargers available. Just for context, Jacksonville is the largest city landmass in the whole United States, over 875 square miles. So all y'all cities can probably fit in our place once or twice or 3 times. I would say the main thing I want to leave with you guys is the power of partnership. So one thing I found as we're applying for grants in the city, there are so many people trying to apply for the same grant. And we actually found out that our local community college was applying for CFI. They applied. The first round wasn't awarded. So what we decided to do was take their application, put it with our application, and do EV charging at all of their campuses, plus some city sites, and we were awarded there. The last thing I would say is get creative with the match. I am a new sustainability office, and we don't have money. So I was able to build a relationship and just like really talk nice to my utility, and they offered 100% of the match. So they're doing transformers and all of the infrastructure. So let me know if you want to know how to finesse the utilities. I got you.
You're a utility whisperer. Well done. All right, let's get around. All right, Gordon, do you wanna share from, who we got? We got DeKalb, Micro Gordon, you know what you wanna share?
I'll pass and see what.
Okay, sweet. Rick, you wanna share from Raleigh?
Why not? I'll make it quick. I know I'm between now and the bar, so. So listen, my name's Rick Longbard. I'm the fleet operations manager for the city of Raleigh. So I sit on the other side of the fence, right? Most of you are probably in the sustainability world. I'm the guy that's probably the cog in the wheel, but hopefully not in the city of Raleigh, right? So we work with sustainability really, really close. There's not a day that goes by that we're not talking to Megan Anderson. I'm sure most of you probably know, right? There's always sustainability in mind. So we did pursue the CFI, and it sounds to me like we were awarded, but maybe never received, right? So we're happy about that we at least were awarded $2.4 million. We should have asked for a hell of a lot more money, right? Our challenge, much like you, is that we have a very unique situation in the city of Raleigh. We have to go through the grant committee to get approval to apply for a grant. And we also need to prove the budget and finance that we actually have a 20% match. And that was kind of our stigma, right? Is we couldn't put up more than that we could afford. But we should have asked for more. But nevertheless, we were real excited about the award, which will result in the 6 DC fast chargers dual ports throughout the city. 60% will be just the 40 area. And in addition to that, there'll also be 22 L2 chargers, right? But fortunate for us, that is just another opportunity for us to build out more infrastructure. We've been steps ahead. In 2022, we went into contract with ICF, and we did what we refer to as our EV implementation strategy rollout. And that plan will look at replacing 2,200 vehicles for electrification in the course of the next 10 years. We currently have 100 electric vehicles, we have 38 chargers, 58 ports in the city, tie-ins, everything. We're fortunate. We do have software that manages all of our clean energy, such as renewable diesel, renewable propane, CNG, T85, T20. Everything we run in our vehicles is about 90% clean energy. And the software that we're deploying have now gone live with can actually do EV transactions as well. So we know where all of our systems of record, regardless of what clean energy, and that same software also networks all the chargers. We can see who's using them, whether enabled, disabled, how many times they plug in, how many kilowatts they use, because we're going to charge that cost back to our stakeholders, right? Because we got to treat it like gasoline. So what we're looking at is building hubs, because we don't have enough infrastructure versus the amount of vehicles that we have, which is over 5,000. So we're treating it like we're not going to put a charging station in each parking lot in every city facility, because one, we don't have the power distribution to do that. So we're treating it more like a gallon of gasoline, right? So we're going to build charging locations in all of our 7 fuel hubs and build enough DC fast chargers where they just go to those fuel sites like they are now and charge for 5 or 10 minutes, start to manage their own behavioral actions, right? So we're fortunate we have ARPA dollars that we're building our first DC fast charger. Hopefully the CFI will prevail. We did get energy block grant money. We got EBW settlement money. We've applied for CFAP money. If you haven't applied for that, there's a pool of money there. We've been very, very fortunate in our EV implementation strategy. Is kind of our system of record to say, council, we need this money because, right? And so the whole initiative is probably going to cost us $20 million, regardless of grant funding and otherwise. We work real close with budget. We are putting in $2 million each year. Hopefully that'll be approved for EV infrastructure. And we're just collaborating really well. And I like your point, right? It's a myriad of efforts, right? You can't do it by fleet. You know, sustainability can't do it themselves. Facilities can't build the infrastructure unless you know where you're building it. You've got to work with the energy providers. You got to work with IT for software. It's not a one-stop shop, right? You have to work collaboratively with others. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. We're also real proud of the fact that we have 3 beam chargers that are dual ports and all 3 chargers so we can move them around. And now we're looking actually at solar as a microgrid. So we're building out one of the DC fast chargers as a solar array canopy so that when there is sunshine, it will charge the chargers and we don't have to worry about being on the grid. And those solar beam chargers also allude to the fact that we didn't have to touch any ground. We didn't have to build any infrastructure. We literally put them in place. So we're real proud of that. So any questions, be around for the next 2 days. Thank you.
Well done. Is there anybody who thought I was going to call on them that I neglected to call on? Making sure I didn't miss anybody. Well, I just want to take, if we could just give a round of applause for all of y'all who have done incredible work. And there is just so much richness in all of that work that was done to get those CFI grants in the door and awarded. And I hope it's richness that we're going to be able to keep mining, if I can use a mining reference, because we're talking about EVs, going forward. So well done, y'all.